So today we're going to look at ways to find the percent of a number. Percent of a number would be the part of a number. Now you might remember from 6th grade or earlier, when we talk about percents, we are talking about parts of 100. So when you see the term percent, go ahead and put this on yours. When you see the word percent, that means out of 100. So when you see 75%, for example, what that's saying to you is 75 parts out of 100 parts, out of the 100 being the total. So anytime you're looking at percents, you're looking at things out of 100. All right, let's go take a look at this real-world link. Some students are collecting money for a local pet shelter. Model shows they've raised 60% of their 2,000 goal, or $1,200. So they've raised $1,200. Here we go right here, this cute little graph with the bones at $1,200. They're at 60%. So what we're going to do as a warm-up is we're going to take each of these percents, we're going to make it a decimal, we're going to make it a fraction. 80%, so you can see 100. 100% as a decimal is 1. I want you to write this, cross that out, and I want you to write it as 1.00. That's going to help us see what happens with the decimals in percents. If you want to review, by the way, of changing percents into decimals, there's a video on that in the video library. So 80%. Well, let's go back again on a trip to 6th grade. Let's take 80%. And in 80%, there's the decimal. And you may have remembered them talking in 6th grade about moving it over twice. In fact, those clever 6th grade teachers, they actually gave this a name. They called it butt cheeks, like sitting on your butt. You have to move it twice. You don't want to move it once. If you're on one butt cheek, you fall over. You have to move it twice. So 80% as a decimal becomes 0.80. Now this 0 right here, you don't need that 0. You could write it as 0.8. If you put it on a calculator, it would come out 0.8. But it's nice to see the 80, to see both digits. How about as a fraction? What would that look like as a fraction? Well, it would look like 80 parts out of 100 parts, which we would then simplify. What goes into 80 and into 100? Yeah, your first thought might be, oh, 10 goes into both. Okay, so divide them both by 10, 8 and 10. But then you're going to say, wait a minute, I can still go further because 2 goes into both of those. You're right, it does. So divide it further and you get 4/5. Okay, pause the video. You have 60%, 40%, 20%. Pause the video, fill in those, and then we'll come back together and check them out. And we're back. So let's go through. For 60%, you'd have 0.60, which is 60 out of 100. What goes into both of those? Well, 20 does. 20 goes into 63 times. 20 goes into 105 times. You should start seeing a pattern here. 100% was 5/5, 80% is 4/5, 60% is 3/5. You might look at that pattern and say, oh, I'll bet this is going to be 2/5. Well, it is, because it is 40 out of 100. You can divide this by 20, you get 2. You can divide that by 20, you get 5. As far as the decimal goes, you should have 0.40, or you could just have 0.4. That would be correct also. Let me put this other 0 just in an optional color. That's an optional 0. And 20%. 0.2 optional 0 for a fraction of 1/5. And then, of course, 0% is all the way across zeros. To the next page, to the next page, to the next page. Okay, here's one of those topic areas that you really want to make sure you keep track of, right? Anytime you see this colored bar, this is a piece of information that you're going to want to keep track of. So let's look at a couple of examples here. Example 1. Find 5% of 300 by writing the percent as a fraction. So 5% is 5 out of 100, which is 1 out of 20. So 1/20th of, whenever you see that word of, it tells you you are going to multiply 1/20th of 300. So 1/20th times 300. They simplify, they cross-cancel to simplify. You have 1 times 15 over 1 times 1, which is 15 over 1, which is 15. So 5% of 300 is 15. You might already know that 10% of 300 is 30. Anytime you're doing 10% of something, you just move the decimal point 1 time. So if 10% is 30, half of 10 is 5, half of 30 is 15. There's another way to check it. Okay, let's go down to another example. Find 25% of 180 by writing the percent as a decimal. So write 25% as the decimal, 0.25, then multiply those out, and you get 45. Okay, so let's take a look at these problems. And here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to solve this problem using the fraction method, problem A, and solve problem B using the decimal method. So you're practicing each. So do A and B, A with fraction method, B with decimal method. Then turn the video back on. We'll discuss the answers to those, and then you can go ahead and try problem C and D for some additional practice. So go ahead and pause, solve A and B, turn the video back on, and we'll discuss. Okay, so A, using the fraction method, 40%. I'm going to do my work right here for A. So 40% of 70. Step 1, turn the 40% into a fraction. It's 40 over 100, which simplifies to 2, 20 goes in there twice, over 5. So now we have 2/5 of 70, which is 2/5 times 70 over 1. 5 goes into 5 one time. 5 goes into 70 14 times. So that means we have 2 over 1 times 14 over 1, which is 28 over 1, which is 28. So your answer to A, put it right over here, your answer to A should have been 28. We're going to solve B using the decimal method. So let's put our work for B right here. We have 15% of 100, which is 0.15 times 100. And the nice thing about decimal methods is you can use calculators. So 0.15 times 100 equals 15. You might be saying, boy, that decimal method is a whole lot easier than that fraction method. Well, it's faster in some ways. The fraction method is really helpful when you get to algebra later, because with algebraic equations, it's hard to use decimals. You can't really turn them into decimals. But here's the thing about what we're doing now. You can pick whichever method works best for you. So you don't have to use the fraction method if you prefer to use the decimal method. However, we're still going to practice both here. So now, pause the video again, and you're going to do C and D. And again, with C, this is the fraction practice side. So please do C with the fraction method and do D with the decimal method. And then turn the video back on, and we'll go over it together. All right, so what do you do if the percent is more than 100%? Well, you do exactly what you've been doing. That's the thing. You can have more than 100%. You could have growth of more than 100%. Let's say you had a company and 1 year you made $2 million, and the next year you made $5 million. How much did it grow by? Well, it grew by more than 100%. It grew by 150%. So you'll see this using percents greater than 100. And then we've got some examples. And notice when we do those, it's done exactly the same way. We turned 120% into 120 over 100, which is 6/5. And they did exactly what they did before. They multiplied the 6/5, they cross-canceled, and they end up with 90 over 1, or 90. So 120% of 75 is 90. Here's the thing to always remember. If you're doing more than 100%, your answer will be more than you started with. So anytime this percent is greater than 100, your final answer will be more than what you started with. In our past ones, where the percent was less than 100, the final answer is part of the original. It's less than the whole. But whenever your percent is greater than 100, your final answer will be more. So let me just illustrate that right here. If I have 80% of 20, I've got 0.8 times 20. And when I do 0.8 times 20, let me grab my calculator, just get in the habit of using the calculator. When I do 0.8 times 20, my answer is 16. Notice the 16 is less than the 20. The 16 is less than the 20 because my percent, because 80% is less than 100%. But in this example, where we were doing 120% of 75, we were doing 1.2. I'm going to change it into a decimal. 1.2 times 75, we got 90. And the 90, that final answer, is greater than the 75 where we started, because the percent that we were doing, 120%, is greater than the 100%. So you'll get an answer that's bigger than your original, and you'll go, wait a minute, but that's because it's more than 100%. All right, example 4, you can look through that one. It's doing the same thing, changing it to a decimal as opposed to using a fraction. So go ahead and do problems E and F. Turn off the video, do the problems, and then we'll come back with an answer. Okay, so for problem E, let's do this one as a fraction. So we have 150 over 100. 150% is 150 out of 100. Let's simplify those. I can see 50 goes into both of them. 50 goes into 150 3 times. 50 goes into 100 2 times. So I have 3 halves times 20 over 1. Simplify, 2 goes into 2 once. 2 goes into 20 10 times. And now I have 3 times 10 is 30 over 1 times 1 is 1. My answer is 30. And notice the 30, the ending answer is greater than the 20 because the 150% is greater than 100%. For the second one, let's make it a decimal. So 160% as a decimal is 1.6. You're doing the same thing there. You're moving the decimal twice. There are the butt cheeks. So 1.6 times 35. Where's that calculator? Boom. 1.6 times 35. I don't know what my answer is yet, but I know it's more than 35. It's 56. 56. And again, the 56 that I ended with is greater than the 35 I started with because 160% is greater than 100%. Okay, I think it's time for us to do we got one more example. All right, so we're going to do that example, and then we are on to some practice problems, some guided practice problems. So let's take a look at this gadot problem. And let me see if I can get the screen to roll down. Perfect. Room to work. Okay. So Mr. Sudamak earns a 4% commission on the sale of a hot tub that costs $3,755. How much did he earn? So go ahead, pause the video for a moment, figure out how much he earned, and then turn it back on, and we'll discuss it together. Okay. So he earns $3,755. So we need that $3,755 times the 4%. So 4%, remember again, you move the decimal over 2 places. So when 4% becomes a decimal, you have a 0. You have this 0 as a placeholder. You have to have that 0. So we're multiplying this by 3755 times 0.04. And again, calculators, real tools for real problems. 3755 times 0.04 equals $150.20. So he earns a $150.20 is his commission. All right, now it's time for you to practice some problems. So would you go ahead, do problems 1 through 4. Turn off the video now, or not turn it off, but pause it. Do problems 1 through 4, and then we'll come back and discuss those answers together. Okay, here we go. Now remember, if you get the first one wrong, pause the video again and think about what mistake you made, and then look at the next 3 problems and decide, do I need to change something before I look at those answers? So on the first problem, 8% of 50. Step 1, turn the 8% to a decimal, 0.08, and now multiply the 50 by that decimal, and we get 50 times 0.08 equals 4. Our answer to the first one is 4. Okay, if you're ready to watch the second one, here we go. If you need to pause to fix yours, pause and fix. 95% as a decimal equals 0.95. So we have 40 times 0.95. 40 times 0.95 is 38. 38 is the answer you should have had on number 2. Number 3. Get this up a little bit so there's room for my calculator right here. 110%. Is this answer going to be more or less than 70? Has to be more. Has to be more because 110% is greater than 100%. So when we change 110% to a decimal, we're going to end up with 1.10. We're going to multiply 70 times 1.10. 70 times 1.1 equals 77 is your answer to number 3. And problem number 4. Mackenzie wants to buy a backpack. It costs $50. The tax rate is 6.5%. How much tax will she pay? So she's got a tax rate of 6.5%. As a decimal, that's going to be 0.065. We're going to multiply that by the 50. Notice, even though I'm using a calculator to do this, I'm writing down my steps. Be sure you always write down your steps. That way, if you come back later and find that you made a mistake, you have a way to look at it and figure out what you did. If all you did was punch numbers into a calculator without writing down your steps, you have no idea what you did or didn't do. All right, so for number 4, the answer is $3.25. So there you go. This is your video on percent of a number. Use this when you need to study for the test or just If you need to review how to do this kind of work, this is your place. Thanks for watching.